Welcome back. Now that we've discussed what it takes to make a complete sentence and what some common mistakes are when people are trying to join clauses, let's talk about the tools that you have to correctly join different kinds of clauses together. We're going to start first by talking about commas and conjunctions, the simplest of these options. You've probably heard this acronym before, fanboys, and fanboys is a way to remember the simplest of the conjunctions. It's for, and, nor, but, or, yet, and so. These conjunctions, I like to think of them as they're a little bit smaller, so they can't do quite as much as they're on their own, which means that they need some help. They need the help of a comma in order to join two independent clauses. There is an exception. If you're using and it's just in a list of two things, it doesn't need a comma. You're not really joining clauses in that case. In that case, it's just a list. But if you are joining two clauses, as in this case, we have Joe wanted to cook, and we also have his parents wanted him to be a lawyer, you can use a conjunction, one of these small conjunctions, and a comma to join those two clauses together. Thus, we have Joe wanted to cook, comma, but his parents wanted him to be a lawyer. Keep in mind, shorter conjunctions, smaller conjunctions, they need some help, so they need to be paired with a comma. And I said keep that in mind because there are other types of conjunctions, and we're going to talk about subordinating conjunctions as well. It's more complicated than that, but we're going to simplify it to subordinating conjunctions. And some of those would include because, however, after, although, as if, whenever, furthermore, despite. There are a ton of options out there. Subordinating conjunctions, I like to think of it again, are a little bit bigger. They're a little bit longer, so they can do a little bit more on their own. And that means that they can sometimes stand in the middle and hold both sides up without needing any help. That also means that they can allow you to move the clauses around. So you can move that dependent clause either to the start or the end of a sentence if you're using a subordinating conjunction. And it's not perfect. English breaks its own rules a whole lot, and I'm simplifying, but for the most part, if you follow these rules, you'll be good. Subordinating conjunctions, then, yes, they're bigger, they can do more, they allow you to move stuff around. However, the placement of the dependent clause determines whether or not it needs a comma for help. There is a video linked probably right after this lesson, as I should do, that gives a nice visual and explains this pretty well. You're welcome to watch that if you'd like to. However, I'll loosely explain what they do. If the dependent clause starts the sentence, there needs to be a comma in between the two clauses. This is because if you think of your conjunctions as actors or people trying to hold up both sides of a sentence, then if it's in the middle and it can split the weight evenly between the two sides, it's probably fine on its own and doesn't need a comma. However, if you flip that order around so that your dependent clause starts the sentence and your independent clause ends the sentence, that means that you have your conjunction trying to lift all of the weight of the whole sentence on one hand, and that's just not going to work. It needs some help. That's when you put a comma in the middle. So hopefully that helps you to remember how to do this, and we'll go through a couple of examples. So here's where the conjunction starts the sentence and necessitates a comma in the middle. Because he didn't want to let his parents down, comma, he became both a chef and a lawyer. If you flip that around so the conjunction's in the middle, you don't need that comma. He became both a chef and a lawyer because he didn't want to let his parents down. Again, these rules aren't perfect for every situation, and types of conjunctions get more complicated than that. But in general, if you follow these rules, you should be good. This is just an extra tip. It doesn't have to do with joining clauses, but it does have to do with lists, and it's a little thing. If you're using and in a sentence where you are joining two independent clauses, you're still using it to join clauses. It still needs to follow that rule where it has to come with a comma. If you're using and in a list of two items, like I said earlier, you don't need a comma. It's just a list of items, and it's a really short list. If you're using and in a list of three or more items, do use a comma before the last thing in that item. This is called an Oxford comma, and it actually does help to clarify things in some situations. For example, if you look at the left picture over here, it says, come meet Janet, comma, a clown, comma, and an acrobat. In that sentence, you are telling somebody to come meet 3 different people because you have the comma separating every item in the list. In the item or in the list on the right, it says, come meet Janet, comma, a clown, and an acrobat. We're missing that Oxford comma right here. That means that you're telling somebody to come meet Janet who happens to be both a clown and an acrobat. So it does actually change the meaning of your sentence if you're not using that Oxford comma. I don't know why there's argument about that online because it's fairly straightforward. Just use a comma between everything in a list and you'll be good to go. All right. Again, I'll share this video after this lesson so that you can watch it if you want to. If you're at all confused, I recommend taking a look. It is helpful. I really appreciate visuals and analogies and stuff, and this helps me out. I know the video is kind of a little kiddish, but it is quite useful.